I actually can lower it a bit. That's too much trouble. That's the secret to VEDS. Minimal effort. Hello, friends and fellow VEDSies, and welcome back to whichever day I decide to put this out on VEDS. I am here with my good friend Steven.
I'm a sweaty boy.
My sweaty boy friend Steven.
I'm a good sweaty boy named Steven.
Now, Steven is a friend that I made during last year's VEDS. Probably somewhere around there. But since then, we've become friends, and we started a podcast with my buddy Alex called Star Wars Therapy. And so to promote that, but also just to introduce you to a cool guy, I wanted to do this video where we go through our top 5 comedic influences.
Yes, I'm wearing the Baby Yoda shirt and everything to show you how much of a sellout I am. So let's make this happen, baby.
I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a funny person or attempt to make funny stuff, but I do think our generation has like a certain air of like kind of cynical humor to them, where they kind of can't help. And so I feel like everyone kind of has comedic influences. And you're also a super funny guy, I would say.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I was about to say, I don't think of myself as a funny guy either. So
I think of my friends currently, you are the funny one. If like we were gonna do the Ninja Turtles, you are the Michelangelo.
Oh God! Thank you.
Yeah.
That means so much. I'm serious. Shit.
And Alex is the blue one.
Leonardo.
I'm Donatello because I'm the biggest nerd, and Joe's the angriest. So
Joe is absolutely Raphael. We've figured out our Halloween costume.
It's better than the fall, guys. Without further ado, do you want to go first or do you want me?
Well, I guess since I'm new to the show, yeah. So when I was thinking about my favorite comedians or comedic influences, I was kind of trying to pull from a lot of from people in my life who hadn't been canceled yet, obviously, because I have now denounced some of those and been like, I can maybe take some influence, but I'm not gonna cite them.
And we reserve the right to cancel anyone we talk about now.
Literally anyone. But I guess the first person that came to mind recently is definitely Patton Oswald.
Yeah.
Because I love how the way he constructs jokes is like, it lets you know a little bit about him. He'll tell a joke about his daughter and something fun they did, but then he'll tell a joke about something really specifically nerdy. Like he'll talk about the speech from Blade Runner or something, and people still laugh, but he doesn't ever go too hard and be like, well, in Green Lantern issue number 43, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, am I right? St. Walker, a Blue Lantern, crazy cat. It's like, no, that's not what he does. And not to put a sad beginning on this, but his wife did recently pass away, and the mother of his daughter, and he was able to not make fun of it, but find the humor in it.
Yeah.
Like, he talks about going to, like, a graveyard and, like, saying goodbye, and he talks about every, movie character that's done that, it's at night, and it's like, why would they go at night? They're closed. Patton Oswald, just because he really showed me you can find humor in literally everything.
And he's very versatile, like, from acting to stand-up to his voice acting. Like, he's a guy who I don't know when the first time I discovered him was, because I had probably seen him in like 17 other things before that.
That's a really good thing. I think the first time I recognized him was Ratatouille. Because, like, there was a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff that was all over, like, Disney Channel or whatever.
So, I'm ordering mine not in, like, a ranking or anything.
Same.
But I did order them chronologically.
Oh.
Because I thought that
should have done
that. So, my very earliest comedic influence is, and this is one that I'm not sure if you have any experience with, but it's one that in the Christian culture I grew up in, everyone has.
Bob the Tomato.
Veggietales.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie to you. I love Veggietales.
Veggietales is great.
It's so good. That is a tradition in my house, is watching the VeggieTale Christmas special, and every year quoting, "Who's Billy?
Not gonna lie, I've been thinking about this idea for a while, and I was like, what episode am I gonna talk about to explain why Veggietales? And it is Buzzsaw Louie.
It's so good!
There's a lot that's good about that. Like, I think the delivery and the comedic timing's really good. Obviously, the music's great, but what I love about that is the absurdity.
Absolutely.
Like, in the embrace, and like, the absurdity of it's a Christmas special where everyone is vegetables, but their ideal toy is
a human!
With a buzzsaw in
And
their
hands
arm.
and thumbs.
What? Who thought of that? Like, hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, just premise-wise, and then, of course, they execute it really well.
Of course.
The great Christmas song in the middle where with the IRS joke.
I'm from the IRS, and I come to tax her. Whoosh! Okay, so we do acknowledge that in the VeggieTale universe, that all of these characters have some minimal distance telekinesis.
Yes. Yeah.
We all acknowledge that.
It's a mild telekinesis field around them.
Yeah, it's just around them. And then at one point in this, like Buzzsaw Louie, who is the only character in this entire franchise with ligaments, is like, I'm sure that there are deep cuts.
Khalil the caterpillar from Jonah the VeggieTales movie.
Oh, thank God we cleared that one up. But, like, what's funny is he goes, all right, everyone, find something to grab onto. And then everyone just kind of looks at each other like, what? And he's like, okay, bad answer, bad question, like, or whatever he says. And my thought is, like, well, you guys can't just, like force grip the snowboard to stop going down this hill for like a second.
And it's just like how crude the animation is in
very
early
much
stuff. But like that never gets in the way of them being able to have a funny expression.
Yeah.
And the animation style is so simplistic that when they've tried to update it recently, it just has not worked.
Yeah, I caught some clips and I was like, hashtag not my VeggieTales.
The other thing I'll bring up is for the VeggieTales movie, there is a commentary track. A friend turned me onto this because we did a Hot Trash Unlimited episode on it.
Oh God, I thought you were like a kid and you were like, how did they make it?
No, but it's with Mr. Lunt and Larry in character commentating over it, but they're doing like pop culture references.
I never knew that existed.
And it's that cultural awareness, and so much Christian media is like in a bubble. But I feel like VeggieTales, while they always stuck with their like theological like groundings of you can't show Jesus and the vegetables can't get salvation.
Right.
Those were their two rules.
Because those are the rules in the book.
They were still aware of stuff outside.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I just love too that they just have. You're right. It's the delivery of the jokes. Like I think of like the simple thing. Bob, you okay? Mousetrap. What? I wanted to play Mousetrap.
So what's your number 4?
My number 4 is probably the one that I want to say my dad, but I also know my dad was influenced by a lot of comedians, and one of those would be, I definitely think, Bill Hicks. Have you ever heard of Bill Hicks?
The name sounds familiar. I'm sure I've heard his stand-up before.
Bill Hicks is the kind of guy who, he was the right comedian at the right time, poking all of the right taboos. Like it was, I want to say it was the 80s kind of where that whole, parents versus rock and roll and versus video games and violence. Satanic Panic and a lot of that stuff. A great example is when he's talking about religion, or he's talking about, okay, let's make the actual assumption that heavy metal is like Satan's music. At least he jams! He did a really good job of pointing out like things in our society that don't make any sense, and he just does a good job of poking at those. And I think he's one of those guys who, when you see what he does on stage, he either goes completely on script or goes completely volatile to the point where it's a show. One comedian talked about him, another comedian I'll bring up later in this actually talked about him when he was doing a show with him. He was in the room while he started, and it was fine, it was funny, whatever. He leaves the room, and then he comes back, and Bill Hicks is like this close to somebody's face in the audience going, I'm a poet!
So do you think that so there are a lot of comedians, I think, who get very self-righteous about their comedy and be like, I am the watchman on the tower calling down all your sins and transgressions.
My soapbox is not only bigger than your house, it is your house!
But like there are those comedians who can touch on society and make it interesting. How do you think he handles that stuff? Is there ever a time when like you think he gets a little bit too self-righteous, like yelling at someone about how he's a poet?
Yes, I definitely think that there are times where he gets too self-righteous, but I think that excess in opposition to the forces at work at the time, I think was necessary.
Yeah.
Like, I think that him being off the wall and being just like yelling in someone's face and doing all that, it's the same thing as when thrash metal came out. You know, it's not your mom and dad's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Okay, next choice on your part, number 4.
Yeah, moving a little bit further. So I'm still a kid, but a little bit older, and kind of reaching out. And I was like, I read a lot as a kid, so there has to be a literary comedic influence, and I could only think of one.
Ernest Hemingway.
No.
Okay.
Series of Unfortunate Events.
Oh, wow. That's, you know what? That's off the wall, but I totally understand, and you saying that to me and me knowing you, that makes perfect sense.
I'm glad you say that because I was trying to think this through, and this is the hardest one for me to articulate, so I wasn't sure if it was accurate.
I'm a huge fan of the series as well, so I think I can help you out a little bit. I am losing which way my hat is going, and the way the monitor is set up, I keep thinking it's this way, but it's really this way, and I don't want to be an idiot and do this.
You'll be a cool new Kids on the Block kid.
I'm with Marc and here's my funky bunch, baby.
It does have the absurdity of Veggietales. It also has a lot of wordplay and kind of meta humor. But I think it's the tonal balance and like how dark the humor can get, but still feel like kind of light, that I really appreciate.
I think that what you're getting at is that it is dark humor, but it's never mean-spirited.
Yes.
And the reason why it works, for me at least, and I don't want to take away from your point, but the reason why that worked for me as a kid is because the anger was never unwarranted, and it never came from a character that wasn't already angry.
Yeah.
When Count Olaf does something awful, it's like the Joker doing something awful. Like, oh no, the bad guy did a thing we don't like. God forbid.
Because of the meta humor, there's a level of, this is going to be okay. Like, we're going to go to some dark places for a kid's book, but it's going to be okay at the end.
Well, especially when Lemony Snicket, when he'll write them, he'll say something kind of off the wall about, like, you know, a character will pop in for a second and look at the kids. I think specifically it was Penultimate Peril. There's a guy who says, like, hey, if you come with us, like, we'll take you to this. And he tells you, like, what would have happened if they actually went with them, and you're like, oh, thank God they took this choice. Now what I'm about to face seems a lot better. So I really love that.
And just a small, like, little thing to throw in. The books obviously had a big influence, but the audiobooks did too. The first couple are narrated by Lemony Snicket, by Daniel Handler, I think is his real name.
Yeah.
But then the rest of them, and then they went and recorded those first 4, are narrated by one Timothy Curry. And Tim Curry...
Are you serious?
Yeah. And, like, I'm not saying that Tim Curry necessarily influenced my comedic tastes, because, like, I look at what I output and, like, what I'm drawn towards, and I'm like, I'm not sure if it's totally Tim Curry-ish, but I definitely appreciate it, and I'm glad that that was my introduction to him.
That's really fair. I can, oh my God, picturing him doing Count Olaf is great.
Oh, yeah. It's wonderful.
And Violet Baudelaire did this. That's fantastic. I love that.
Lemony Snicket did a good job, too, but, like, Tim Curry just blows him out of the water.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's Tim freaking Curry.
And I will say, I guess, just throwing one more small thing. The show's really good, and I think it carries over the humor really well. Figures out how to do that visually in a really cool way. And I think tells the end of the story a little bit better.
Than the movie or the book?
Than the books.
Okay, because I never finished the series, but I did finish the books. And I was like, it was always a weird note for the books to, like, leave off on.
Book 13 is the longest book. All the episodes of the show are 2-parters, except for that one. It's a 1-parter. And I think that gets to the core problem of that book, which it was just way too much padding.
Yeah, because, I mean, they ultimately... This is now a video about Series of Unfortunate Events. I mean, they ultimately end up on, like, an island, and they just kind of meander on the island for a while, and then they're like, there are these fruit that vaguely have to do with something that we mentioned before, and you're like, what?
Well, it's this whole religious allegory that, like, the longer you think about it, the less sense it makes.
A little bit, yeah.
We're on 3?
We're on number 3, and I alluded to him earlier because he He actually kind of introduced me to Bill Hicks after he had said the "I'm a poet" like joke and talking about him, and I was like, I've got to know more about that guy. Marc Maron is a fantastic comedian. I really love him just because he's like the cool uncle that I never like had. Sorry to my uncle, but like, yeah, you're really cool, but like this is a different kind of cool.
But you're not Marc Maron cool.
Yeah, you're not Marc Maron cool. You're not. You can pull off a mustache at age 53.
Yeah.
You know, he does a good job of like showing his age, but showing it in a way that you understand how he grew up, not necessarily how old he is. He talks about like being a Rolling Stones fan and like kind of what growing old does to you about like, you know, he's like, look, I loved seeing the Rolling Stones at concert, but the best part was beating the traffic. He'll go on a rant for a minute about like a relationship or a guitar, something just totally off the wall tangent. And what I love too is that he can read the room. So like, obviously, you know, 2016 was a big year for a lot of reasons. And the first thing he does when he comes out on stage is he just sits down and he just goes, I don't know what he's going to do next. And the people who voted for him don't know what he's going to do next. And it's just like acknowledging the tension in the room and then breaking it.
And that's what so many comedians were trying to do at that time. And I think some people do really well. Like, I think Dave Chappelle on SNL.
Absolutely.
His monologue did great.
Patton Oswald did great with it too.
Kate McKinnon playing Hallelujah on piano, not so much.
Yeah. He has a voice that is totally his. It's just cynical enough, but it's also with a tinge of sadness. You understand and you empathize how he's cynical, but that he's also acknowledged. It's weirdly layered. His comedy is weirdly layered, and there is an insecurity about it that I do love. I think he's just always one of those voices I can have on in the background and be like, yeah.
These two kind of came at the same time, so I wanted to make sure I had which one was ordered first. And I put this one first because I may have come to it a little bit later, but I think I appreciated it more at the time.
There's thought behind these things.
So, the USA detective comedy Psych.
Oh my god. This is a show that everyone I know has told me to watch. I never have. They're like, no, dude, there's an episode where they parody Twin Peaks. It's really funny. Would I find it funny? I don't know. So, but anyway.
I didn't find it funny when it aired, but that's because I had no idea what Twin Peaks was.
Meanwhile, I'd probably be like, oh, that's great.
The time may have passed for you. I think it... I'm just not sure how much it will hold up outside of nostalgia. This is kind of why I wanted Alex here to record this episode, because he also really likes Psych, slightly more than I do, and he's gone back to it a little bit more, so he could maybe fill in those gaps. But for what it was for me as a kid, it was the quickness of the banter. And when I do write, whether it's supposed to be comedic or not, I really gravitate towards banter. And I think Psych was definitely one of those influences. Everything is said like so quickly. They're referencing a bunch of stuff, but never letting that be just the joke.
Yeah, it's not like Family Guy where it's like, hey, this thing exists. Or like Robot Chicken where it's like, hey, Transformers is a thing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if they said curse words?
And they go for it and do stuff to like elevate the concept of the episode. They aren't worried about like making things too serious and stuff, and I really think that helps. They have a Clue episode in one of the later seasons, and I forget who it is. I think it's Sting. It's actually not Sting. It's Kurt Smith from Tears for Fears, and I'm very ashamed that I forgot this. But they kill him off. It's like he's in the episode, and then he gets mauled by a panther. What? And then he comes back in another episode, and then you realize that is a dream of one of the characters, because guess what? He's still dead.
Alright, I can watch the show. That's fine. I can do that. You've sold me on it.
In terms of like referential humor, which was big, I think it's the best that did that, because I also like watched a lot of Nostalgia Critic and stuff, which
we all have our regrets.
People who we don't condone any longer.
Yeah, some people that you wish you couldn't remember.
But like that the joke was, do you remember this thing? And in my case, I'm like, no, because I wasn't born then, but I think your delivery is funny.
Right.
This is like they're referencing it in clever ways. So
yeah, I think that absurdist comedy like that attracts me more than like something like The Office. Just a personal thing. I'm a big fan of like more absurdist things like Portlandia or even like Parks and Rec, where it pushes the absurdity of the comedy more. So
Yeah.
I could see Psych being something I like. It's just if it is the time for me to watch it or not, you know?
This definitely doesn't get to the Portlandia side of things.
I love Portland.
They're one of those things, I think, I call it kind of like Looney Tunes humor, where it's the only thing that's important is getting to the next joke.
Yep.
This one, they do still have mysteries, and they do still have like character growth and stuff like that. But I think that there's also that level where they aren't afraid to be really out there with it.
They know how far they can go, but then they go, well, how much can we push it?
Yeah,
which is good. Know your limits and then surpass them. So my last two choices are more recent for me, but at the same time, they're the culmination of some things I've always wanted to do. And I guess I'll bring up the first because he has the most tie to my childhood, and that is Oney, Chris O'Neill. The cartoons he made when I was a kid, when he was on Newgrounds and like Flash animation and stuff, Left for Speed, The Sixons, even though they're god-awful, like... And he was 16 when he made them and stuff. It's like, but he was still 16 when he made it. And it made me laugh. And, Leo and Satan is a great series that he did. And I've always appreciated him for not apologizing and being able to make jokes about awful things, but not be awful. There is a complete difference. And that's what I love. And what's really great, too, is that on his gameplay channel, when he plays, like, he and the guys... who also were in Newgrounds, end up really exacerbating that flow of consciousness kind of comedy where it's like, okay, I'm going to reference something from my childhood. Let's reference Jimmy Neutron. What would you do if this Jimmy Neutron character did this? And they just give ridiculous answers. It's a show that's not trying to be anything. It's just being. And that's why I've always loved about him, is that no matter what he's done, he's at least been creative enough to push it to its limits. So you go like, all right, I'm going to put out what I want to put out. If people don't like it, whatever.
Well, and that's like the DIY spirit of the internet.
Yeah. That, to me, was the defining cartoons of that, mid-2000s, like, kind of edgelord humor that somehow he has still made good now without having to be so much of an edgelord.
Which probably helps because, like, if he's putting out good stuff now, you don't have to go back to the old stuff that maybe doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
Your answer just there made me decide to change up my last one because you just started making me think about internet humor and which is actually the biggest influence. But this one is not internet. This one is very much before my time, but I watched it anyway, and I liked it. It's another TV show, and specifically I'm focusing in on one character from the show. And the show is MASH, the character is Hawkeye.
I thought you were going to say Family Matters and that the character was Urkel. And I got so excited. And
I liked Urkel as a kid.
Let me down.
I liked Urkel as a kid. But, and this is the thing where I can go back to MASH so much more readily than I can go back to Psych. And I don't want that to be a dig against Psych. I want that to, say how good MASH is.
Yeah, that should speak to the quality of MASH, which is a show, once again, I haven't watched that show, but I've heard so many good things about it from so many different people. And so when you say that, now I trust it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a weird show. It's very dad, in my opinion. Dads like it a lot.
I'm not going to lie, whenever MASH would come on, it would kind of be like, well, TV's over. You know what I mean? Cartoons would be on, and then it would be MASH, and I'm like, all right, time to leave the room.
Well, and I say it's dad humor. My mom is the one who first showed it to me. But then she started buying my dad the DVDs for his birthday, then Father's Day, then Christmas, and she'd buy him 3 seasons at a time. And so
she buys 13 seasons. She goes, I have the next 2 years planned out.
Basically, but then we're able to watch them as a family going around. And I think me and my dad are the only ones who didn't get worn out on the show because of that. But Alan Alda takes a lot of influence from the Marx Brothers and stuff.
Hang on a minute. Alan Alda's name is literally Alan Alda?
Yeah.
I thought people were saying it with a northern accent this entire time. Okay, go on. I thought his name was Alan Alda. And then everyone was just like, Alan Alda.
Alan Alda.
What do you know about it? Alan Alda.
Oh, get back over to Korea. No one likes Aftermath.
Donald Pleasance.
Alan Alda, like I said, Marx Brothers, very highly influenced. There's an episode where he dresses up as Groucho Marx and stuff.
Right.
Obviously, though, in that it's also like set against the Korean War, and it is like activism comedy, so like there's more to say with that. So he like tones down kind of the banter and the slapstick of Marx Brothers. And I say him because he did direct and write a lot of the show as well as star in it.
Oh wow.
And he's not I don't want to downplay the rest of the cast, because the rest of the cast is amazing, but he is one of the only actors who stays in for the whole 13 seasons. He has a very smarmy, sarcastic attitude, which I do emulate. And I think not consciously, just like I have watched so much of that show that I am Hawkeye, just kind of lounging back with a martini that like I distilled and just like making fun of
I would say your martini is very watered down. However, at the same time, yeah, you definitely have like the smarminess that. But the thing is, the smarminess that you have doesn't make you come off like a jerk. It's just like, oh, that's a joke he's making. That's nice.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and I think
this is out of character for Caleb. Okay,
there are definitely times where that crosses a line.
A little bit.
But I think that like why it works in the show and maybe not so much in my life is because
it's a show.
Well, because he is in Korea. What he's railing against is like American imperialism and like a terrible, senseless war. So like he's always punching up in the show, and also the show is just very progressive for the time. Like there's a gay character in one of the episodes, and like they talk about that, and it's very don't ask, don't tell kind of conclusion they come to. But
at the same time, what other conclusion would you come to at the
70s,
time?
Yeah, like, and it's just where they weren't afraid to do stuff. And like he petitioned Congress not to censor TV, and like he was always willing to go and make his comedy mean something more than just a smarmy guy like laying back. And I think what sells MASH the show and doesn't sell MASH the movie is MASH the movie.
There's a MASH movie?
Yeah, it started as a book, and then there was a movie made by Robert Altman starring Donald Sutherland, and then based on the success of the movie they made the show, but they're very different.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the movie, the characters, the humor shows how depraved the characters have become in this war setting. The humor in the show is showing how they're holding on to their humanity in the war setting.
And that, to me, should be more of the message, especially, 70s, I think, definitely. That should be more of the message, is hold on to your humanity, because what you're going to be doing is so inhumane. Not to make this a super serious thing, but, I mean, at the same time,
MASH would do that, though.
Yeah, like, at the same time, like, what you're describing, to me, describes you a little bit, like, just in terms of what we end up talking about. Because a lot of the time, you and me are just going back and, like, making jokes and talking about whatever. But then, eventually, at some point in the conversation, I think we always kind of have a, what do you actually think about that?
Which is, we were talking earlier about the September episode of Star Wars Therapy. And you mentioned how it's one where we do less jokes and bits. But I don't mind that, because like it feels just as natural as that. Where if we had forced in jokes, then it wouldn't feel natural.
Forced in?
Ba-bum.
Comedic influences, we've got them. Cue the giant hook that pulls one of us off stage.
The giant hook was not in this year's VEDS budget.
The Rancor pit was, though.
Well,
thank God for the Rancor
wasn't
pit.
going to uninstall it.
It's in an apartment complex! For God's sake!
Alright, was your number, obviously not ranked, but was your last comedic influence?
My last one is one that, man, it is so simple, but they have influenced not only my comedy, but they've influenced the way I view film, the way I think about how I analyze films. Because I feel like before I was exposed to...
Oh, I know who you're talking about now.
Red Letter Media.
Yeah.
Yes, Red Letter Media is my number one. I think, honestly, they probably are my number one, just because they made me look at film differently. When you like something because it's schlocky or because it's cheesy, that's okay to like it because it's schlocky or cheesy. It's okay to not like something that everybody else likes. I think that them being so honest and so genuine, but on top of that, them just tearing apart the Star Wars prequels within an inch of their life. The fact that the first words I heard this person say were Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace is the most disappointing thing since my son. It sets you up for exactly what their humor is going to be and then what kind of guys they are. I like that they're guys who actually know film and therefore can make fun of it and explain why it's bad. And it made me, I think before I really got into them, I disagreed with their opinions a lot more. I find myself agreeing with them a lot more.
I mean, that makes sense. They're not only influencing your comedy, but how you see things.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's a problem at all. So is it the Mr. Plinkett stuff that you're most drawn to?
No, actually.
Okay.
I like the Mr. Plinkett stuff, but it is unfortunately kind of one note. Mm-hmm. It's let's point out everything that the Star Wars movies did wrong.
Little cinema sensey. Better.
A little bit,
better,
but it at least makes points that no one really was able to articulate before that video came out. And everyone kind of went, oh my god, that's why they suck. Like, I couldn't put my finger on it. I love what they do with Best of the Worst. I love Review, which is a great series they do where they actually talk about movies that mean something or just of cultural significance. I mean, they talk about Blade Runner, and ultimately neither of them have a really strong opinion about it, but I really like listening to them talk about it because it is such an acclaimed movie. They are themselves and they don't sell out. I remember specifically when I was 5 years ago, so I was like 16 or something. No, I'm sorry. I'm not 21. Oh my god, how old am I?
Well, I'm 24.
I'm 25. Okay, I was 20. Jesus.
I was about to say, I thought you were older than me.
I totally forgot how old I was for a second.
Welcome to the existential crisis portion of this
Hello,
video.
I'm grown man in Baby Yoda shirt, here to tell you why you should listen to our Star Wars podcast. No, I was 20 and I had gotten out of the theater and I had watched Suicide Squad and I was like, it was good, it was great, it was perfect. And then I watched the review.
All
and they
correct
were
opinions, by the way.
Yeah, all of them. And I remember them talking about like, yeah, this movie's kind of a dumpster fire, and I was like, no, it's perfect. But then I look at it now, I'm like, yeah, kind of right. It's fun trash, though.
It's fun to have one wrong opinion, Steve. But I hate to ask this question because I don't have an answer. Do you have a favorite member of
Mike?
Okay.
Mike to me, just because he's the straight man, but he also always has like the funniest inserts that he'll say. But when he laughs, it's honestly like kind of out of left field, and you're like, wow, he must really think that's funny.
Yeah.
And because you don't hear it that often, it's infectious.
Yeah.
And then you just start laughing because you're like, Mike thinks it's funny. You might not even find it funny. Mike's my favorite, but I would say Jay, I probably align with his opinions the most because he's, artsy, horror. Oh, this movie's miserable and I love it.
I relate the most to Jay.
Yeah. You also look the most like Jay. So, man with beard is man with beard.
I do need to trim the beard.
I need to grow mine. My little pledgy boots. All right, Caleb, you're number one.
So my number one, and once again, not ranking, just timeline-wise, it was gonna be SourceFed, and
interesting.
Because they had a mix of different type of comedians. They had some people who just weren't comedians
and
but
content. They covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and especially Elliot Morgan on there. His stand-up. And just his humor and he had this series called Happy Hour, all of which kind of influenced me as the intellectual side. But then
comedy can be smart.
But then you were talking about Newgrounds, and it made me think, oh wait, there's other internet humor outside of YouTube, and that made me think of this podcast I listen to called The Weekly Planet. It is.
Oh my god!
You like The Weekly Planet?
I love The Weekly Planet.
Yeah.
We didn't go over this beforehand,
no.
So this is all wonderful, wonderful things. Yeah, I love those guys.
So I discovered the main host, Mr. Sunday Movies, before that, back when he was, just making random YouTube videos every
Time to talk about my favorite things about Star Wars.
I remember one time he was talking about who is a Avenger they can kill off just because of disposability, and he was like, it's Hawkeye. And then I wrote a treatise in the comments. I was like, you're right, but here's why I love Hawkeye. And he responded, and I was like, yes.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because he was smaller back then, so he could respond to comments like that.
Yeah, now he's got 1 million subscribers.
Yeah. So of course, when he started a podcast, I listened to it, and it's got this weird guy who's named Nick Mason, but not the Pink Floyd guy. So I was like,
I forgot his name was Nick Mason.
Yeah.
Not the drummer for Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Not that.
Weekly, I have listened to every single episode they have put out, some multiple times, because there's some that I just go back to.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where just through osmosis, they have influenced me in what I find funny, and now when I formulate bits, they're very much based off of Weekly Planet.
I understand. Red Letter Media is 100% that for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, I want one of those. Like, anytime you hear something good, you're just like, no, I want that.
But I think the biggest influence for them was just that they're like such normal guys.
Yeah.
Like, one's a tram driver, one used to teach school. Like, they're just super casual and laid back. They're not putting on a persona. Like, occasionally, they'll, like, James will be like, get, like, performatively mad at something.
Yeah.
But you can tell that's coming from a space of actual anger.
Right.
So, like, but they're still able to be funny and talk about nerdy stuff. Coming out of, like, the Nostalgia Critics, where it was, like, all performative anger.
Yeah.
Like, it was so refreshing to be like, I don't have to be all big about what I like. I can be just like casual and like hang back and joke around.
You know, that's honestly, I never thought about it, but that's definitely the biggest appeal, is that when I listen to them, it feels like, okay, so a big thing that I think puts people off about movie critics and people who talk about movies is that they speak with some kind of authority, as in like, no, I'm right about this. I never feel like they do that. They always just talk about like how they feel about it, even if the opinion is not popular, which is really hard to do nowadays.
Well, and I like, one of those examples is like how they handled Justice League when that came out, which was this huge mixed bag of a movie, and obviously that turned into this whole thing. But one of them was just like, it's bad and explained its reasons, and the other one was just like, it's good and I have this Justice League lanyard and I'm gonna just keep bringing that up just to remind people of how silly this whole thing is. Like, you can't get mad at me because I'm not talking about Justice League, I'm talking about the lanyard.
The lanyard's great. Yeah.
It's like expanded to be like creative influences now. Like, I have 4 podcasts. I take some stuff from their podcasts, especially I think with Star Wars Therapy.
Yeah, I get that.
But also, like, they started a podcast network in Australia, which also is why half my podcast feed is Australians.
BigSandwich.co!
Well, before that, it was Planet Broadcasting. Then,
that's right.
Then they shrunk it down into BigSandwich.co.
Which, that's just a great name.
And that's another thing I like, is like they started the podcast network because it was harder for Australian podcasts to get like advertisements and stuff, because all the money was going towards American podcasts. And then eventually this company called Acast came in, and they're like, oh, Acast is doing this but much better. We don't have to do this anymore. They didn't have an ego about it. And like, I really appreciated that.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, you saying they didn't have an ego about it, I think just proves why they are such a good voice, especially I think right now in the face of so many YouTube critics.
Yeah.
Of just like,
Black Widow is a detriment to feminism, and I'm going to tell you why for the 18,000th time.
That is probably the number one thing I try to bring in from them, because I'm a very arrogant person. I think that's pretty obvious to anyone who's spent any amount of time with me. But the humility that they bring in, not even humility, just like casual, like you said, not ego.
Just they're just guys.
To bring it back to Star Wars Therapy, that's what I kind of wanted Star Wars Therapy to be, because like we were having conversations about Star Wars before the podcast, and it's like, oh wait, I used to like this. Yeah, this is Star Wars, but like everyone's personality isn't like tied to it. So if you attack one thing or say you like one thing, that they have to go to battle with you.
That's honestly the biggest reason why I like doing the podcast with you too, is because it really feels like 3 guys who come from different walks of life in terms of their life with Star Wars.
Yes.
In particular.
We are all 3 white guys from Tennessee.
Not much difference there. You know, because for me, I'm more of the cynic, I think. Yeah. You have cut yourself off from the Force, and then Alex is just like, I love everything! Which is great, and we need that, because I need to find the good sometimes to equal out sometimes where I'm like, yeah, but they were just setting up a sequel by having that character in there.
You can share in that experience, seamless transition, I know, by listening to the latest episode of Star Wars Therapy. It's on the Clone Wars, the 2D anime Clone Wars.
Yeah, my recommendation this time.
And super fun. We had a great time talking about it, and you can easily go and watch those on YouTube if you are curious and you've never seen them and you care about Star Wars.
Definitely.
And if you want to hear my suggestion for one, we talked about which would make good podcast interviews, and it's by far our weirdest episode.
That's my favorite episode so far because I think if anything, that one proves how much of Star Wars nerds we actually are, is the characters that we picked. It's like, none of us was like, Obi-Wan Kenobi!
None of us had good answers.
No, I think Alex had the most legitimate answer, which was like,
Rex.
I want to interview Captain Rex.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm like, I want the guy in the back of Jabba's palace, the blue elephant man on the keyboards, please.
If they have 4 arms, I want to talk to them.
Which is why we'll be coming up with Combat Talk, where we talk about how Caleb wants to interview Goro from Mortal Kombat.
We have sat down probably for like at least 40 minutes to an hour now.
Probably.
Who knows how much I can trim this down.
I don't know how much time has passed anymore.
I really do appreciate you coming over to my house and
Of
giving me
course,
this
always
time.
a pleasure.
And I appreciate our friendship and our ability to laugh together and to make stuff together.
You have
so,
beautiful eyes.
shake my head. This is
Right.
how we're ending the video.
Right,
All
right.
Yes. Okay.
2 kissable boys. Kissable.
And that's what we thought. We have to leave them waiting.
Yeah.